What's my scene from the Hoodoo Gurus on Revenge of the 80s radio? The Gurus were an international success and received a lot of airplay on U.S. college radio stations, where they found a plethora of lifelong fans across the globe from their native Australia. With me now is the lead singer, guitarist, and mainstay of the band, Dave Faulkner. Welcome to Revenge of the 80s radio, Dave.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Excellent. Happy to have you here. Now, as with many great musicians, let's go a little further, because the Gurus are not the first band you were a part of. In fact, you gained some notoriety out of the early Australian punk scene with the Victims.
That's right. Yeah, well, I was in Perth, and we were a bit bored and excited by this music we were hearing from elsewhere. And we've been reading about it first, then we finally got to hear some records when they got into the import stores as they slowly came out. And we formed our own groups, and the Victims, the group I was in Perth, was one of them. And we made a couple of little singles, like a single and an EP, and those kind of become quite collectible over the years. So, we've got a bit of a reputation somehow.
And back then you were known as Dave Flick.
Yeah, I had a punk name, partly to not embarrass my family when I was, becoming outrageous in the press, which it did happen, and also it tied into a nickname I had as a child, which I will not bother going into, but it was something to do with that. So, the Ramones had all their names, Joey Ramone, all their names were changed to one thing, so I chose a punk name as well.
What attracted you to the underground music scene overall at that time?
Well, as I say, it was the most exciting music going on in the world. We were teenagers in Perth. We felt isolated completely from all that sort of stuff, and it seemed like we were in prison or something. This is how it felt, and we just wanted to do something to kind of excite ourselves and tap into that music that we're thrilled by.
But you did have a punk scene in Perth.
Yeah. As I say, it was kind of weird. The first band that played a gig was a band called the Cheap Nasties, who I was a member of for about 5 minutes. I did about 3 rehearsals with that band, and they're all friends of mine. But I quit, and they, a few months later, they finally played a gig, and that was the first official punk show in Perth. And the people that turned up at that show, saw a little ad in the newspaper, punk show tonight, whatever, and they all came along, not knowing that there's anyone else in that city that liked that music, because it was so obscure, and certainly not something that people were interested in at all in Perth. Perth was completely turned off by that sort of stuff.
But still, the Victims are considered one of the great acts out of the Australian punk scene, with Television Addict as sort of a marker in the genre's history.
It's a pretty good single, I got to say. It's got a lot of energy. It's a pretty fun track and really memorable. So, the Victims were a great pop band. We were punk rock, but we also had melodies and catchy lyrics. James Baker, who was the drummer for the Hoodoo Gurus when we started, he was in the Victims with me, and we met with that band. And James's lyrics are pretty funny, and there's a certain sort of attitude there, which I think is something he had in common with the Ramones, with Dee Dee's lyrics and Joey's. There's a certain kind of dumb, smart thing going on there, and he was perfect as a lyricist for the Victims, and I can write a pretty good tune now and again, so that all could have worked together.
So how did you all get together with Rudolph as well?
Yeah, well, Rudolph was in James was rehearsing with another band when he met me, a band called the Hitler Youth, and they had different names at different times, but that was one of their names. And when James and I met at that first Cheap Nasties gig, it was kind of like, nitro meet glycerin. It was sort of just like we just connected straight away. And he just that night he said, let's form a group. And that was what happened. So he kind of lost interest completely in Hitler Youth and got teamed up with me, and then and Rudolph was in the Hitler Youth as well. So we needed a bass player, so we grabbed him. So it was a bit rude of us to do that, but we were just doing something that felt good. We weren't thinking about the consequences or is this a career or anything like that. We just let's form a group. Let's go with this guy. Let's make some music. And I guess he could have been in both groups if he wanted to, but it didn't happen that way.
Well, it would be tough as far as worldwide marketing if you were in a band called the Hitler Youth anyway. It was probably time to get out. Think about that.
Well, we weren't thinking about that. That was their problem. We thought the Victims was a kind of a cool name because, punk was so aggressive, and so we kind of turned it backwards upon ourselves, that we were victims rather than the perpetrators,
So what do you think of the Victims' place in punk history? And I mean, this is punk history around the world.
I'm really, really proud of it. And funnily enough, I've just done some recording with the Victims again because we, after many, many decades of inactivity, James and I, started really working on Victim stuff together again a few years ago. Partly coincided with, what happened was James and I had a bit of a falling out, musically speaking, when he left the Gurus. That was kind of he's pretty sour grapes afterwards because he was kicked out of the band, to be honest. So there was a lot of bad feeling there because the band went on to a lot of success, but it was all a whole lot of other stuff going on. So there was always a sort of the sore point there. And so when James agreed to come back a few years ago and do some Hoodoo Gurus shows, which we did this whole thing where we got all these old members to come back and play shows, I thought, well, of course, I'm going to do some Victim shows with James because he'd been after me to do some Victim things for a while too, and I'd kept saying no because I just thought, if you can't like the Hoodoo Gurus and, you don't like me being in the Hoodoo Gurus, you can't like me being in the Victims. There was some sort of, I just wanted him to sort of accept the fact that, we'd moved on and time to sort of, and he did. So it was kind of like it sort of opened everything up, and we started doing Victim shows. At first we called ourselves the Television Addicts just to kind of draw a line, but then just end of last year, we just did our first show under the name The Victims, and it was really amazing. We don't have that Rudolph in the band anymore. We have Ray Arn from the Hard On, so he's another bit of Australian punk rock royalty, because that's a band that really went on, had a huge reputation around the world, and to this day they still play. So Ray's pretty amazing. And we've done some recording and some old Victim songs that never got recorded properly, so that's going to come out hopefully in the next 6 months or so. So there's a few things with the Victims happening at the moment.
And Dave, speaking of the new tracks from the Victims that you were talking about, one of them you're releasing now about Charlie Manson.
Yeah, we released it just after he died. We actually were mixing the track when we heard he was dead, so we thought, let's put it out now because we had something to say about it. And but there's a song from 40 years ago when the Victims were going, but we were just talking about what a dickhead he was. So we just thought we'd let people know that we didn't particularly want to celebrate his death, other than as a good riddance to bad rubbish.
What foresight! That's what I can say. Now, after the Victims broke up, you joined the Mannequins for a bit, but soon you and Baker would make music history again with the Hoodoo Gurus. We're going to talk about that in just a bit. I'm Chris Cordani. Dave Faulkner of the Hoodoo Gurus is with me. Straight ahead, we'll talk about their formation and their stuff on Revenge of the 80s Radio. That's Television Addict from the Victims, recorded back in 1977, released in 78, co-written by my guest Dave Faulkner, and you know him as the man from the Hoodoo Gurus. Dave, you and James Baker would form the Gurus in 81. They were different from the punk bands of the 70s and helped usher in the Australian new wave. How did you form the band at the time?
Well, a couple of guys I knew from James was someone I knew from the punk scene, but also Rod Riddell was someone that was hanging around the punk scene. He was in a band called The Scientists, who James was in for a while after the Victims broke up. And I travelled for about a year, went to New York and so forth, and I saw bands like The Cramps and B-52s and DBs and people like that, and the Flesh Tones. And, I'd kind of, been broadening my palette a little bit after punk, because punk was such a narrow sort of version of rock and roll. I mean, I love punk to this day, but I also love a lot of other stuff. And, that was kind of a good little, grounding to start with, me in music. But I wanted to draw in other influences because there's a lot more to enjoy than just pure punk rock. So when I came back to Australia, I wanted to get involved with that. But I joined the Mannequins for a while in Perth because I was broke and I was stuck in Perth and I wanted to do some music. And also that band was talking about travelling to Sydney and Melbourne and places that are a bit more the hubs of music in Australia. And I thought that'd be a good way to do that. But unfortunately, they never did, Terrell. And so I had to quit that band after a while and move to Sydney where I wanted to set up. So I moved to Sydney and I met Rod Riddell at a party. And it was a New Year's Eve party. And, we'd known each other from Perth and the punk scene. And we talked about forming a group that very night. We just at a party talking about music and all the different things we liked. And, we've been listening to a lot of different things, old rockabilly and different sorts of things like that, and, 60s punk. And we just thought, why isn't any bands playing the sort of music we like? So we decided then and there to form a group to do that, play the music we like, just as it was with the punk days in, Perth and the Victims. Let's play the music we like. No one else can do it. Let's do it ourselves. And so we got Kimball Rendell, who was also there. The three of us had been talking, as I say, about this thing. And so the three of us decided right there to form a group. And we all played guitar. So we decided, I'd seen the Cramps and the B-52s, and neither of them had bass players. So we thought, we don't need a bass player. We'll just get a drummer and that'll be enough. And we thought 4 people was enough for a band anyway. 5 was a bit like an army, 4 was a group. And, that's when we decided to start writing songs. And after a few months later, James wrote a letter saying, the Deciders have broken up. I'm moving to Sydney. Can I join your group? So that's what happened. James came over to Sydney, and he was our drummer. And, it took us another 6 months of writing and rehearsing in our spare time because we all had day jobs to try and pay our expensive rent. But eventually we played in September that year, 81. And, the rest, as they say, is history. It took us a while, but we eventually got a record contract and so forth and so on.
And it was back when you were known as Les Hoodoo Gurus, the French version, I guess.
Yeah, Le Hoodoo Gurus, not Les, Le.
Le,
the reason
okay.
we call ourselves Le because, we are a group, so it was a Le, singular rather than a collection of objects, plural. But also there's a famous drag queen troupe called Les Girls in Sydney. So we thought we don't want to be Les Girls or Les Hoodoo Gurus, so let's do Le Hoodoo Gurus. A little bit sexist of us, I suppose, or something,
It's just my American accent. That's what killed it, It sounds better with an Australian emphasis, I suppose. Leilani was your first hit in 1982, and it was also a time when music videos were becoming more popular. Yours, for that one, was fun and interesting, mixing some performance with photo imagery and some neat editing tricks, state-of-the-art at the time, and a true sign, and the true sign of a great band. We always say it here on Revenge of the 80s Radio, snazzin' suits.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing we I guess we kept that thing up from the punk scene where, we wanted to dress individually and it was kind of our thing. We just had this whole thing about these old sort of zoot suits and various 60s psychedelic sort of stuff as well. We kind of mixed and matched it all together. It was a bit of a jumble sale, really, but it looked unique, and that was us. So, you can sort of see that early part of the band's career, in that video. That video was actually made as a freebie because, as you say, music video was sort of in its infancy, and everyone was doing little courses and I want to be involved in music video, and so they were doing courses at this place, which was a film school type place and in Sydney, and they wanted a band to be the specimen band while the students practiced making a music video. So that's what we did. We got a bunch of our fans to come on to the shoot, and we played and, let these people go crazy with their cameras. And then later on, Kimball Rendell helped edit it because he was a film editor, and, he's involved as a film director now. So he had quite a strong film connection.
Of course, listeners to this song were probably dancing to it and enjoying it. It was very upbeat, really cool, having fun. And you listen to the lyrics a few more times, and they're thinking, wait a minute, this is really a sad song.
Yeah, well, it's obviously deliberately melodramatic. It's based on a film I saw called Bird of Paradise with Jeff Chandler. It's about an island princess being thrown into a volcano to appease the gods. So Hollywood sort of, hula skirt epic, and we've kind of obviously taken a bit of having a few liberties there. It wasn't a serious song. There was no one we know that's ever going to be thrown in a volcano. It's not exactly a likely outcome for anyone in Sydney. But, we just wanted to sort of explore these sort of colourful themes, went along with our colourful clothes, I suppose. We were taking life fairly lightly at that stage.
Another video I liked from the Stone Age Romeos album, which Leilani will be a part of later on, was the one with the cool dog and the greasy spoon, My Girl.
Yeah, that was a great video. I still think that's one of our best videos we ever made. So, that was Kimball's idea, actually. Kimball wasn't in the group anymore. We recorded the album with a bass player. We had Clyde Bramley joined at that stage. So Kimball had left to actually follow filmmaking. And, I spoke to him about, we're still very good friends. And I just said, look, this song is kind of like this teen romance song, written almost as a tribute, really, to those classic tearjerker songs from the mid-'60s, early 60s. And I said to Kimball, I can't imagine us doing like a Duran Duran type video with models running around and reenacting the lyrics. It'd be really cornball. And he said, "We'll make it about a dog." And so that was my original idea was to actually make it about. It was going to be like Lady and the Tramp. It was going to be two dogs falling in love. One was like a super famous greyhound, and the other one was like a shaggy dog. Tramp sort of, dog, stray dog in the streets, and it was just like this love story. But of course, having dogs acting and all that sort of thing would have been too expensive and impossible. So instead, it became about a trainer and his dog, and that great relationship, and how the dog disappointed him by not winning the big race.
A few more hits later, you did wind up touring the U.S. in 1984. Dave Faulkner is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. The Gurus were very popular on the college radio circuit here in the U.S. How important was that trip to the band and its overall international success?
Well, it was everything, really. We jumped at the chance. As soon as we were signed up to a US deal, which is through A&M Records, they gave us the dance, and we used that to tour. And, we just wanted to, from the very first, days of the band, our first gig was like in a little inner city sort of haunt. And our second gig, we played support for a band in a country town, like a big city outside of Sydney. So from the very get-go, we'd always wanted to spread our music wherever we could. And that partly comes back to my feeling of being isolated in Perth when I was growing up, and feeling like, I was a bit left to fend for myself by my favourite artists. They were all over in glamorous places, playing music. But whenever they came to Australia, they'd never come to Perth. So my attitude had always been, whatever chance I ever had to, play to any audience, I'd make the most of it, and not talk down to that audience, because they can't help where they live, just like I couldn't help living in Perth. Anyway, that's sort of been my attitude from day one. And so when we got the chance to play in America, it was like, let's just go and have a shot, and just play and see what people think, and see if they like it. We thought our music was good, so other people might like it too.
Dave, you and I might have something in common as a result of your trip to America. I understand from an article I read a while back that you are, or maybe were, also a fan of the New York Mets.
Absolutely. I kind of fell in love with baseball. As I say, in '79 when I went there for that big long trip, and I spent quite a few months in New York, I went to my first baseball game and had it explained to me by a friend, Will Rigby from the DBs. He took me to my first game and gave me a bit of the lowdown on how the game worked, because it was quite foreign to me. And on repeat visits to America, I started to get quite into it, and I had to choose a team, and I thought, well, I'm a National League fan. I know that's slightly blurred now that interleague play, but back then it was quite separate, the National League and the American League. And I believe in the strategies that are thrown up by the not having a designated hitter rule. So I was a bit of a purist in that regard. So I chose a National League team, and New York was the city I spent most time in, so I chose the Mets.
And if anybody from baseball is listening, from Major League Baseball right now, people in Australia also think the DH is stupid, okay? So that's it. Although
I wrote a song about baseball actually on our fourth album.
Yep.
Where's that hit? And in fact, if you listen to the lyrics really closely, it's kind of like a Casey at the plate sort of lyric, where it goes blow by blow through a game. And it's a particular clutch situation he's in, and the song is in that moment of whether it'll fail or be the GOAT or be the hero. But if you look at the lyrics, they actually quite specifically explain that I must be playing for the Mets, because it's bottom of the ninth at Shea. So who else could I be but on the Mets team?
And to be fair, though, David Nilsson, who was an Australian-born ball player in the majors here, he was an outfielder, first baseman, but kept getting hurt, so he had to DH for a while on the Brewers. But that happened. So he was a pretty good player, though.
Last week, I just actually had lunch with a friend of mine, and he played baseball for Australia in the Olympics, and he's friends with another guy called Graham Lloyd, who played for the Yankees and was actually a middle reliever and has a World Series ring. So I've seen a World Series ring, across the table the other day.
Oh, that's terrific. He was a great reliever here, and I know he played for the Brewers as well and a couple other teams.
He did indeed. He got around. A lot of Australians do, are getting into the baseball ranks these days, as well as other nationalities. But we're starting to, because there's a healthy baseball scene in Australia, and in fact, it was a huge sport back in the early part of the last century, which no one realises is almost as big as cricket, which is, of course, our national summer sport.
Talking baseball with Dave Faulkner of the Hoodoo Gurus here on Revenge of the 80s Radio, also of the Victims. Let's get back to the music, because What's My Scene from the Gurus' 1987 Blow Your Cool album is interesting as well, because I believe you've said it was one of your favorites because it has two choruses.
It does, like it sounds like you've already got to the chorus line. It goes what at the end of the second verse, whatever, and then you suddenly get the real chorus, and it's like, okay, now that's the chorus. But the other one's pretty good. A lot of people would have been happy with that one, I think. And the other part, of course, I just like the way, I like the bridge as well. The bridge is really memorable. That's something I kind of pride myself on, that, when I write a middle eight, it's not just thrown in there just to sort of be a spacer. It actually contributes to the song and actually, has merit on its own terms musically and lyrically. So things like that, just purely as a songwriter, I look at that song and go, God, I couldn't have done that one much better. I mean, obviously every song you write to the best of your ability, and sometimes they work and they're fantastic. Other times you go, like, didn't quite get there, but you can't really change any little bits of it to fix it. But, the whole conception is what works. But that one is what I look at and say, how did I do that? It's just one of those songs that just came out. Just, it happens all the time, to be honest. You write songs, you don't know where they come from and why you're writing them, but you just have to do it. And, that was one that, just like any other song, I was writing it because it inspired me and I couldn't stop singing it and things like that. And it was only when we played it for the first time I realized that it had some kind of special appeal to other people because, for us it was just a song. But the very first night we played it, people were asking me about it straight after the show. That never usually happens.
Well, think about it this way, Dave. Most people only know the choruses to songs anyway. If you have two of them, that makes your song doubly memorable to more people.
Doubly good. Yeah. Look, as I say, it wasn't. There was no sort of forethought. It's just purely the way it came out. But I'm just really happy that it. As I say, even sometimes you do something and you go, how did I do that? And that song's one of those, where I wish every song could be as good as that.
We could talk about the stories behind a lot of your songs, but unfortunately time is a factor, and I wanted to get to a couple of the more recent things. In 2007, the Hoodoo Gurus were inducted into the Area Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's like our Grammys in Australia. So they've never nominated us for any other award. Actually, we got nominated for Best Album Cover, which is not really one we can claim credit for, but... apart from that, we've never had any ARIA awards, so it's funny that they came to us and said, hey, you're legends now, you can be in the Hall of Fame. And I almost was going to say no, but, family and friends and other members of the band were, very keen for this to happen, and so I didn't sort of I stepped out of the way, and it was really quite moving at the time, to be honest. I was surprised at how much I felt that night.
It was good timing, too, because it was 3 years after another studio album, and then 3 years before your 2010 Purity of Essence, which was your most recent full studio album.
That's right, yeah. We've been a bit slow for a while now. We don't get into the studio as often as we should, but hopefully I'll rectify that this year. But yeah, every album we've made, we've been very, very focused on, and I'm very proud of those records. And I know some people thought that I'm going to lose my mind now. Some people said that Max Shower, the one that we brought out, was a bit sort of heavy going, but I kind of really like that album. There's a lot of songs on there that really mean a lot to me, and Purity of Essence is one of my favorite records we've made, and there's a whole lot of stuff about the making of that record, which is something I will treasure forever.
Well, you can't always just sound like you did 20, 30, 40 years ago, It just doesn't happen that way.
No, well, you write songs that make sense to you now, and, whether that's like things you've done in the past musically or not, it's irrelevant, really. You just got to kind of just, excite yourself, and I can't be a different person, but, I certainly have quite a diverse range of interests, and lots of music influences me, and whether it comes out, in my music or just in my record collection, I don't know, but, I just do what I think is right at the time.
Now, in 2014, you put out a special EP. It's called Gravy Train, but it's special in a lot of ways because you have the different Hoodoo Gurus lineups featured in it.
Yeah, we got all the past members. I mean, there's 4 members of the band at this stage, as it always has been, but we've had 3 different previous incarnations. That doesn't sound right. We've had 4 other members, should I say. So Kimball and Rod were in the very first lineup when we were called Le Hoodoo Gurus, and so we recorded a track with that lineup in 2014, as you say, and they were songs that we had written in the early part of the band's career that never got recorded before. So so we got the Hoodoo Gurus together in the studio, and then we had Clyde and James and Brad and myself doing the next stuff, which was like Stone Age Romeo's era, and that was a track. And then we had Mark and Brad and Rick. Actually, I think Rick he missed out on a track by a standalone track, but and then we ended up with all 8 members on one, like a reworking of Leilani for fun. So it was a 4-track EP, and it was a lot of fun. And we did a tour around that, just playing together with a different lineup, sort of mutating on the stage every night until at the end we'd all be up together.
Dave Faulkner of the Hoodoo Gurus and the Victims is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. You still perform as the Hoodoo Gurus, Dave, and of course, as you said before, you perform Victims songs live as the Victims as well. You got some Victims music coming out. You have some live appearances set for 2018. Tell our audience what you have down the road here.
Well, that's about as far as I know right now. I mean, hopefully, I spoke earlier about getting in the studio and doing some new Hoodoo Gurus music. So that's a priority, but I have to write the damn songs first, because I don't finish songs until I have a project I have in mind. So I've just got to kind of get myself into that space and make that happen. Of course, we'll be playing off and on.
It would be hard without the songs.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. All things lead from there. I mean, that's as I say, it's got to have a vision that I feel as a songwriter that I want to chase, and I have different ideas, and I just got to see which ones sort of shake down into actual song form, and then that will lead us to where we go next.
Dave Faulkner, thank you again for joining us here on Revenge of the 80s Radio.
Thanks, Chris. I'm sorry if I ran off a little bit occasionally, but it's a bit early in the morning for me now.
Oh, that's what we want. We want you to rattle, because no one wants to hear me rattle off. I do enough during the show. I yap on about this stuff, and they just want to hear from you this time. That's all.
Okay, no worries. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Chris. It was great speaking to you.
Dave, let's play a track from the Hoodoo Gurus 2014 Gravy Train EP. Too Bad, She's Bad.